Hello, my loves, and welcome to another episode of Light's Vigil Tarot. If this is your first time here, my name is Ashley, or I'm also known as Ash, and I'm really glad that you're here. I hope that you all are keeping well, and for those of you who have come back, thank you so much for joining me for another episode. Just a quick little note for those who are new, this channel goes over decks, tarot decks, oracle decks, in the hopes to kind of get a feel of how they're used, maybe what the emotional or intuitive feel of the deck is, to see how essentially it shuffles, and I go through a bunch of different guideposts for how I review the deck out of 5. And I hope that this is very informative and gives you some insight to see if this deck might be for you. So, the deck we're going to review today is the Rumi Oracle deck by Alana Fairchild. Now, for those of you who don't know, Rumi is a poet, an amazing poet. And when I saw this deck, I thought, you know what, this would be really good to pick up. This is the box here. And this is another beautifully done deck by the Blue Angel Publishing Company. So this is a fairly older deck. This was originally published in 2016 by Alana Fairchild, but this specific print is 2024. So getting right into the deck, my first category is art and visuals, and how that can potentially be translated into the next category for intuitive readability. And as you can see, these cards are absolutely stunning. These are either done with gouache or watercolor or even potentially oil paints, and they are absolutely beautiful. So vibrant. So much color. Like, look at that. I love that one. That one's kind of Art Deco-y. Very pretty. This deck kind of reminds me with the art of the Osho Zen deck, if any of you are familiar with that. Multiple layers. Beautiful colors. Very, very vibrant colors. I'm dropping the deck here. So definitely for art visuals, and I'm sure you all probably feel the same, this is a 5 out of 5. Art is absolutely stunning. Lots of energy in this deck, as you can feel. The energy practically jumps out of the cards. I love the motion in the cards too. So much movement, so much energy. really just speaks to you. And I think as for my second category, which is usually an intuitive readability, can you essentially pick up these cards without it necessarily going into the guidebook or the deck? And can you get messages from the cards just from the imagery and the colors alone? And I think you all can very easily see, I think that's a 5 out of 5 too. Just like, look at that. So much heart, so much love put into these cards. I love how this one looks almost like wings. This one is stunning too. I love the different layers of self. Almost like Buddha energy. Absolutely gorgeous. Again, if you have no background with Rumi at all or don't know any of the poetry, just for the art visuals alone, this deck is worth getting. Again, stunning. Absolutely stunning. And we'll just have a look in the back again. The back is very similar to the box. Fairly substantial deck if we're to compare it to my hand. Again, about the size of my hand. So speaking of the guidebook, let's go into that. So this is the guidebook here. This one actually comes in color. For those of you who prefer color in your books, so again, it gives you kind of the introductory here. Introduction into Rumi. How to use the deck. Different positions you could potentially do. And then what I love about this book too is it actually takes one of the poems that Rumi has written and puts it right at the top. So that's a beautiful little meditation. Very wonderful journaling prompts too. That's usually another one of the guidelines or reviews that I like to do, and this one just has so much depth when it comes to journaling, shadow work potential, springboarding. And then again, it goes into like a little blurb as to sort of the resonance of the card. And then it goes into like a full description of the card and potential meanings. And again, no slight description, at least a couple pages for each card. And then an honoring ritual at the end, a meditation, a prayer, however you would like to call it. So quite in depth, and again, it's in color. Now for myself, I'm not fussed either way. I'm comfortable with a good guidebook as long as it's got a lot of assets for it to not be in color. But you as a reader or as someone who wants to potentially buy this deck, you might prefer color. And so I'll let you be your own guide in how you would review that. Myself personally, again, in comparison to the other decks and the other books, more about the author too, Alana Fairchild, and her beautiful works. And then this beautiful paintings from Rassouli, who did all the beautiful works for this actual deck. Fantastic work, Rassouli. Like, you can just feel that. And then different books and stuff like that too, from Blue Angel Publishing in the back. Sacred Rebels. That's an amazing deck. Just a heads up. I'll do that one in another review. So again, going over the book, I'd say the book is a 5 out of 5 for stars. It's quite packed with content. It goes very much into the depth of each card. It leaves room for journaling and reflection. So definitely a 5 out of 5 there. Now the next, I guess you could say, assessment review that I usually give each deck is kind of the tone of each deck. And what I mean by the tone, for those of you who are new, is the deck something that is going to be comfortable for everyone to navigate on an emotional level, on a mental level? Is it potentially triggering? And I'd say that very much, again, like anything, depends on the person and what you would read into the card, what visual language you'd get based on color and based on art. But from the tone and actual depictions, I wouldn't say that this deck is very engaging in a dark way, engaging in a potentially triggering way. I'd say this deck is fairly gentle in its tones, not only through the imagery, but also just the colors. The colors are almost very pastel. They're very warm and inviting. Again, with a few dark elements that could be ascertained from the deck, but nothing that stands out and says, blood, gore, destruction, things that might potentially not be comfortable topics for the reader. So I'd say, again, for emotional tone and gentleness, it's a 5 out of 5. It's pretty approachable. Again, some of the descriptions might potentially be trigger-inducing, depending on how deep you want to go into the cards and how they resonate with you. So obviously bear that in mind. But I'd say this is a very approachable deck. And the same thing with trauma or grief sensitivity, which is another one of my assessments. I'd say this is a pretty neutral deck. From a deck perspective, yes. From a doing your own work and going how deep the rabbit hole go, oh my gosh. Okay. Depending on how deep you would like to go down the rabbit hole, was what I was trying to say, with your guardians or your angels or your spirit guides, whoever you would like to connect while doing these readings with. I'd say, again, that is very much a you, how deep you would like to go, and less about the deck itself. So usability and practicality are my next assessments. So as you can tell, this deck is fairly thick in stock. Pretty good card stock. If I were to give this a shuffle, has lots of energy though. Be mindful, or at least my deck has lots of energy. Again, card shuffle really well. Pretty solid. The cards aren't flimsy. Pretty good when it comes, like, you could shuffle these fairly hard depending on how you are with your decks, and I'd say they hold up pretty good. And again, because the card stock is pretty good in the decks, I'd say you have a lot of use out of them before they'd start to wear. So this is another 5 out of 5 when it comes to practicality. I'd say maybe the only thing... Oh no, it's actually quite matte, actually. Yeah, So that's one of the things I look for too in my decks, and especially for those of you who use cards on channels or do readings that are through recording and with light. One of the things that can be hard for readers is a deck glossy or is it matte? And that can really reflect on how a deck would read through video. So again, this is actually quite matte. So again, wonderful if you are trying to record stuff. So yeah, definitely for usability, these are 5 out of 5 as well. So the next descriptor or the next review that I usually do is an inclusivity, or does it represent different diversities, genders. And I'll be honest, because this deck is painted, and because a lot of the figures or a lot of the topics are very gender neutral, you know, like, yes, there's definitely some feminine imagery, but there's some masculine imagery in there too. But for the most part, again, the images are very neutral, right? Like, even, I don't know if I can zoom in on that. Like, it looks feminine, but it also looks masculine too. Like, that is very gender fluid right there. So I'd say that, you know, again, the deck is very neutral in its representation. So this could very easily be approachable for anyone and everyone, especially since a lot of the deck too is either cosmic energy or nature imagery or very artistic stylization imagery, almost otherworldly energy, right? It's almost like someone took an emotion and captured it through color and through paint strokes and through just the energy that's translated into each card. Like, if energy had a form, it's almost like the cards represent that and we're trying to translate that through. That's the feelings I get from the cards. So for inclusivity, I'd say while it doesn't specifically point out maybe certain genders, it's very broad and very open. So I would give that as well another 5 out of 5. The next review that I usually give, which I mentioned earlier, is journaling or reflection potential in a deck. Does a deck actually give you a springboard off into other areas? Does it help you to guide you into other things you can reflect on once the reading is done? And I mean over and above your own work that you choose to do from the deck and the messages that you receive from spirit. Does a deck actually prompt you to do other things? And so in this deck, I'd say yes, because of all the stuff that's in the cards. The images alone are a good prompt to potential shadow work and stuff, but as well as the actual book, right? Going back to the book, you've got poetry if you're into poetry. So from a creative aspect, you've got a little bit more in-depth information about each card, and then you actually have the description and you have your meditation. So there's a lot to work with here, a lot to work with. So yes, 5 out of 5 for reflection. You guys, I hope you're laughing. Oh man, words are hard. I know we're going into a retrograde. We're in the shadow right now of a retrograde. So yeah, words are hard. So I apologize. All right. So price point and value. So this deck in Canadian currency cost me about $42.50, maybe like $45 with tax. And I'd say, again, for the artists that put a lot of energy into this deck, for the card stock that's solid, for the book that has a lot of stuff, and again, Alana Fairchild, you can't go wrong with Alana Fairchild. I have quite a few of her decks, and wonderful decks, wonderful material that she makes. So I'd say for the money, it's a good value. And again, translate that as you will into different currencies. I'd say it's a fair price. Again, I bought this from my metaphysical store retailer. I try as best as I can to support either the indie artist or stores that are local to me as best as I can. Again, supporting local businesses helps to make sure that they continue to thrive. But obviously, if you can't buy them nearby, or you don't have a metaphysical store nearby, or you live out in the boonies somewhere, I can totally appreciate. I believe this should be on Amazon as well. You might be able to find this on Amazon. Definitely have to check that if you don't have access to that. And so yeah, 5 out of 5 for that. Maybe like, yeah, I mean, again, $45 for a deck, I'd say that's pretty average nowadays. You know, especially for Oracle decks that are 42 cards, I'd say it's worth the value, but I'll leave that up to your discretion. So that'll be 5 out of 5. And my last review, or the last point that I usually go over, is its availability or accessibility. I'd say this being an Alana Fairchild deck, Alana Fairchild is pretty much a very popular artist and deck creator. So her stuff, I find, is usually quite available, whether it be at metaphysical stores or even online. She's fairly accessible, and because this book was published and the deck was published in 2024, and apparently there was earlier publications too, but this is the most current one that at least is set on the box. This is fairly accessible. It's fairly new. You know, it's not out of print. So you should be able to attain this from various sources pretty easily. So that's a 5 out of 5 as well. So kind of closing my thoughts for this review, I feel that this deck could be used for any level of deck reader, beginners, intermediate, advanced. This is a very approachable deck and can be very introductory and can be very light, or it could go deeper and it could be springboarded into different journaling prompts and even shadow work, depending on how you would like to use the deck or intermingle it with your tarot. Any cautions for the deck? I'd say, you know, not really. Again, you know, use your own discretion. And be kind to yourself whenever you're doing readings. If something obviously triggers you or sets you off that you weren't aware of, respect that, honor that, listen to your feelings. You don't need me to tell you that, but I always like to say it because some people feel having the permission to do that is helpful for some people to process stuff. And I'd say this would be a beautiful deck for anyone's collection. I love it. I think it's fantastic, and I love the poetry. I've always loved Rumi, so I think it would be a fantastic deck to have in anyone's collection. So I'm really glad, again. I know this channel is fairly new. I'm I'd say pretty new when it comes to filming videos, so I ask for your kindness and understanding. I know in my last video I had some technical issues at the start of the video, but with each video I get stronger, and with each reading and each description I get stronger, so I thank you so much for all your support, and just viewing the channel, subscribing if you found it helpful, liking would be great so that if other people want to see it, that would be amazing. And I hoped that this review helped to give you a little bit of insight of what the cards look like, if it would be a good fit for your practice, and that it was at least a good ride. And if you have any questions about this deck, or if you've worked with it yourself and you love it, don't like it, if there's certain things that you found interesting, please pop it in the comment section. I love to hear what you all have to say. And not only that, it will be helpful for other people to have your perspectives there too when they're potentially buying this deck or passing on it. Also, if there's any decks that you love and would really love to see on here, or you'd love for it to get more recognition out there for other potential deck buyers or card collectors, please also pop that in the comments. I always love to hear about new decks that I may not know about, and I'm sure others of you would also love the same. So until next time, guys, take care of yourselves. Be gentle and kind to yourselves. I'm sending you all an etheric hug, and thanks for joining me in this episode. Until next time, guys.